crisis centers are and step up with the funding required to ensure that when a neighbor is in a mental health crisis, they'll get the best possible care.
The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Canadians love our healthcare system. From coast to coast to coast, we understand and believe in the Canada Health Act, in the importance that healthcare is to all Canadians. I was disappointed yesterday when members of the Conservative Party and the Bloc Party, the Unholy Alliance, came together, Mr. Speaker, and they voted against a national pharmacare plan that's going to be there to support millions of Canadians, Mr. Speaker, whether it's contraceptives or diabetes, Mr. Speaker. These are the types of programs that I believe will make a real difference in the lives of millions of Canadians. And once again, we see the difference between the Conservatives, the Conservative Reform Party, and a caring Liberal government. We see a Conservative that's more concerned about cutting back on things compared to a Liberal government that recognizes the true value of a national health care system that does incorporate some components of pharmacare. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Barrie, Springwater, Oro-Medonte.
Mr. Speaker, the long cold winter is gone. The sun is shining and the days are warmer. June is here, and with its arrival comes the much anticipated opening of local farmers markets all across Canada. In my community, we are very fortunate to have 3 major local farmers markets operating. The Barrie Farmers Market is back outdoors and open every Saturday on Collier Street from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. The Oro-Medonte Farmers Market is open Canada Day from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and after that starts its season every Thursday this summer at Chapel Farms from 12 till 6 p.m. And last but not least is the Springwater Farmers Market, held every Thursday from June 13th to August 29th from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Elmville Municipal Parking Lot. I encourage all residents to get out and attend one or all of these great farmers markets and support our local small businesses and farmers when they need it most. Happy summer to all.
Happy summer.
The honourable member for Fleetwood, Port Kells.
Mr. Speaker, as we consider the relationship between Canada and China, I'm rising today to mark the 35th anniversary of the massacre of those who joined the movement to democracy in China at Tiananmen Square. In response to that movement, which had spread to 400 cities and according to observers caused deep divisions within the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, the decision was made on June 2nd, 1989 to send in the military to put an end to the protest. Nobody knows the cost in terms of the lives taken on June 4th or on what had been a gradual shift to a more liberal society for China. But the level of suppression ramped up significantly. Today, you can be arrested anywhere in China or in Hong Kong if you dare comment or observe this anniversary. Mr. Speaker, democracy is a resilient force, and thousands of Chinese diaspora here in Canada and around the world are speaking up today on behalf of the Chinese people who must mark the day and harbor hopes for the future in silence.
I will just invite members to take their seats. The Honourable Member for Shefford. Mr. Speaker, there are strong symbols for a people, for a nation. Joseph Armand Bombardier started his company in my area in Valcourt. It was in a garage in this Eastern Township's municipality that he developed his inventions, in a building that has now become a very popular museum. On May 9th, over 60 years after his first snowmobile model, its creator was inducted into the prestigious Inventors Hall of Fame in the United States for the 2024 cohort. He now joins a select club with names like Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison, and Henry Ford. Having recently visited BRP's Valcourt facilities, I realized the impressive number of patents Joseph Armand Bombardier obtained that are still helping to change the world today. His ingenuity continues to make Quebec's small business model shine. What's more, he made Quebec dream, inspired the entrepreneurial spirit of Quebecers, and put us on the world economic stage. Americans now recognize what we've known for a long time. Joseph Armand Bombardier is a giant.
The honourable member from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mabuhay! Happy Filipino Heritage Month. Throughout June, we honor the contributions of Filipino Canadians who have worked tirelessly to build their lives here in Canada and woven themselves into the very fabric of our communities, 1 million strong and counting. In Vaughan, the contributions of Filipinos are invaluable, from dedicated healthcare workers who have been our frontline heroes to educators and entrepreneurs across all fields. As a twin city of Baguio City in the Philippines for nearly 3 decades, the ties between the city of Vaughan and the Philippines run deep. In our community, we owe much gratitude to my dear friend, Erlinda Insigne, and all the members of the Filipino-Canadian Association of Vaughan. Mr. Speaker, a community favorite Fiesta Extravaganza started in Vaughan in 2018 and is now expanded to 9 cities across Canada and will soon be going south of the border. Together, let's celebrate the vibrant Filipino community, their heritage, and their enduring spirit that reminds us of the importance of unity, perseverance, and cultural pride. Happy Filipino Heritage Month.
The honourable member from King Vaughan.
Today we celebrate the Festa della Repubblica in honor of the Italian Republic. This event symbolizes the continuing friendship and cooperation between our two nations. Canada and Italy's relationship has always been close. We are connected through over 1.6 million Italo-Canadian who mainly reside in Toronto, Vaughan, and Montreal. We were honored to have His Excellency Andrea Ferrari, the Italian ambassador to Canada, join us for our flag raising this morning. I am proud of my grandfather who came from Calabria for the opportunity of a better life. I'm especially proud of my grandmother who raised me to always treat people with respect and compassion. We all have the opportunity to excel in the country that gives everyone the opportunity to achieve their goals. Nonna, ti amo oggi e tutto il giorno.
The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With over 30 years of service and on 180 projects for cultural communities, the Federation of Cultural Communities of the Eastern Townships is an essential player in the socioeconomic and cultural integration of newcomers. The Federation creates spaces for meetings and exchanges between immigrants and their host community, for example, with their community garden. The people of the Federation are also proactive in combating racism, violence against women, and discrimination. They highlight the efforts that allow for an open community for inclusive diversity. I'd like to say a special thank you to Boubacar, Mariam, Jesus Chapardin, Roberto, Sumaila, and Henry and Juan Carlos, who are visiting us today in Ottawa, and to the entire team for their incredible work to bring people together from different cultures and to foster development in the Eastern Townships.
The honourable member from Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 months of the horrible pain of war in the Middle East, many families in Canada are feeling the pain here at home. Too many of us know a family who has lost someone in Gaza or has family there living in fear in unbearable conditions. Too many know of a hostage who is no longer coming home, or a friend or family member who was killed on October 7th in Israel. And too many of us have been affected by the vandalism and violence directed towards our communities because of who we are or because of our beliefs and actions. Well, we as Canadians are out protesting. We must remember not to spread hate and fear through our words and actions, but rather to consider our fellow Canadians and how they might be impacted by them. We have a right to protest and to free speech, and we also have a responsibility to respect and protect our fellow Canadians. As we advocate and work towards a permanent peace and long-term resolution to this conflict, let's first and foremost do no harm to our fellow Canadians. Love for all, hatred for none. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le Fjord. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years under this government, our streets are less and less safe. The crime rate across the country continues to rise. Montrealers fear for their safety more than ever in their own city. We've reached the point where the city's police force is completely overwhelmed. Yesterday, the Montreal Police's annual report revealed that 911 calls in Montreal have risen by 10% since last year. 1.6 million calls. People are concerned, and I understand them. This influx of calls reflects the dangerous arrest and release policies of the Liberal government, supported 100% by who? By the Bloc, which have caused crime and chaos in our communities. The Bloc members who claim to defend Quebecers voted for Bill C-5, which allows convicted criminals to stay home instead of in prison. That's why a Conservative Party in power will tackle crime with tougher crime policies to stop crime, to protect you and your loved ones.
The honourable member from Surrey Centre.
Mr. Speaker, today we commemorate D-Day and the Battle of Normandy, which took place on June 6, 1944, during the Second World War. We honor those who sacrificed themselves and served our country in the ultimate battle that led to Allied victory and the liberation of Europe. On June 6, 1944, more than 14,000 brave Canadian soldiers were involved in the Normandy landings and fought with exceptional courage to regain control of Juno Beach and other positions controlled by the occupying German forces. The price of this sacrifice was heavy, and on the first day, 359 Canadians lost their lives, and more than 5,000 died in the 2.5 months of fighting in Normandy. As we commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day, let us not forget the sacrifices our Canadian soldiers made in this battle to bring peace to this world. Thank you.
The honourable member from Dauphin Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, Canadians are struggling because this Prime Minister's inflationary spending and tax hikes have increased the cost of everything. In fact, the average Canadian family will pay $700 more for groceries this year, and many Canadians will have no choice but to go to food banks. Canadians deserve relief from this government's failed policies. That's why Conservatives introduced a motion to give Canadians the summer break they need. We propose to axe the carbon tax, the federal fuel tax, and the GST on fuel this summer so Canadians could afford a summer vacation. Because unlike the Prime Minister, working Canadians cannot afford to jet off for a luxury vacation. But instead of fighting for Canadians, the NDP Liberal government opposed our motion and voted to keep the tax on Canadians this summer. Only common sense Conservatives will axe the tax and bring home lower prices for all Canadians.
The honourable member from Fort Saskatchewan, Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
They advised the communist regime in Beijing on building military islands. They tried to block their employees from pro-democracy activity in Russia. They pointed the finger at influential Saudi dissidents. They helped to supercharge the opioid crisis. They even advised Disney on how to increase profits at the expense of safety. Armed with dark suits and PowerPoint slides, these are the McKinsey consultants, the people who can execute on anything and solve absolutely nothing. When Liberals came to office 9 years ago, they wanted to bring in well-connected insiders, and of course they chose their dear friends at McKinsey. Today's explosive Auditor General's report reveals that the NDP Liberal government repeatedly broke basic contracting rules to send $200 million worth of contracts to this certifiably amoral company. No value for money, the scales intentionally tipped in McKinsey's favor, and lacking evidence the contracts were even needed. Liberals love McKinsey and have broken the rules to shower them with taxpayer dollars, but Canadians have had enough. It's time to throw out the consultants and bring back common sense.
The honourable member from Oakville North, Burlington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recently, my office ran our 5th annual Young Women in Leadership program. This innovative program pairs mentors with young women to provide mentorship and guidance. Through the program, each mentee is given the opportunity to either explore an existing area of interest or to develop skills in a new area of interest. I capped off this year's program by hosting a wonderful reception with keynote speaker Professor Maya, an inspiring sociologist, author, TEDx speaker, and confidence builder. Her message of self-kindness and leading with confidence resonated with everyone, but especially the young mentees in attendance at the start of their professional journeys. Thanks to Jazz Brar from my office, who did a super job organizing. And I'd like to thank all the mentors and mentees from across Halton Region for making this program possible and for creating a safe and supportive environment for the next generation of female leaders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, June is Pride Month, a time to celebrate 2S LGBTQIA+ people, and also a time to unite and combat the disturbing rise in hate right here at home and abroad. There are many organizations doing such vital work that require federal leadership and funding, like that of Reaching Out Assisting Refugees, or ROAR, located in my riding of Nanaimo Ladysmith. ROAR works with people who are criminalized and faced with persecution and discrimination internationally for being 2S LGBTQIA+, some even facing the death penalty, forcing them to flee their home country. To engage in this life-saving work, ROAR receives contributions from generous individuals, businesses, and organizations, but they need the supports to see more refugees sponsored and brought to safety. Today, I urge the Liberal government to commit to the leadership and sustained financial supports required for organizations like ROAR and for all members of Parliament to stand against hate and ensure a future free of homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia.
The Honourable Member for Montarville. We mark today the sad 35th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, in which thousands of students lost their lives. We have been left with images that continue to haunt us. I'm thinking of the students standing in front of the tanks to halt their advance. We obviously denounced these tragic events, but we also denounced the complacency of Western countries, including Canada, which, by prioritizing commercial interests over the protection of human rights, had, in a way, opened the door to such repression. 35 years later, the People's Republic of China controls its population more than ever and continues to violently repress opponents, real or perceived, as well as being belligerent towards its neighbors. As it continues to ruthlessly crush the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong and relentlessly threatens Taiwan, it is our duty to recall the tragic events of Tiananmen Square in order to combat the apathy that could once again make us unwilling accomplices in the recurrence of such events.
The Honourable Member from Bay of Quinte.
This Prime Minister is not worth the cost, the incompetence, or the outright corruption. Today, the Auditor General found $123 million was given out to Liberal friends in the so-called Green Slush Fund, Sustainable Development Technology Corporation, or SDTC. $59 million given to projects that should never have been awarded at all. $76 million of funding that was given to projects that had a conflict of interest. And conflict of interest rules were not followed in 90 cases. In one instance, the Prime Minister's personal friend siphoned off $217,000 to her own company. Corruption is an understatement. This is shameful. The Auditor General found the Prime Minister and the Industry Minister have been found at fault, and the SDTC will be folded up into a federal agency. Yeah, that should help. On top of everything Canadians are going through. Shame on this Liberal government for the disregard of taxpayer dollars. Only Conservatives will end the corruption and bring common sense back to Ottawa.
The Honourable Member from Fredericton.
Mr. Speaker, June is Indigenous History Month. On June 21st, we observe National Indigenous Peoples Day across the country with celebrations and cultural showcases from coast to coast to coast. It's also the kickoff to summer, and that means powwow season. I want to congratulate students from Fredericton and Leo Hayes High Schools who worked tirelessly to plan and organize these highly successful events, bringing together drum groups, dancers, knowledge keepers, and of course, delicious food to share vibrant Wolastoqey culture with their fellow students and staff. It was Fredericton High School's first of its kind, and it will not be the last. For anyone who hasn't had the pleasure of attending a powwow, expect to see beautiful cultural expressions, hear the heartbeat of Mother Earth, laughter, and learning. It is truly a spectacle to behold, and I look forward to traveling the powwow trail in New Brunswick with my family. For all the amazing powwow committees, as well as chiefs and councils across Turtle Island, we'll Li Win for all your hard work and dedication and for bringing this important tradition to your communities and surrounding regions each year. From a time in Canada when critical gatherings like this were outlawed, fast forward to today when all are welcome as we continue our path towards reconciliation.
Oral questions. Questions orales. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the corruption. According to an Auditor General report on the Green Fund, we're talking about billions of dollars spent without respecting the rules, and Liberal insiders who are channeling taxpayer money to their own businesses. A level of corruption that one of the public servants in this government described as being like the sponsorship scandal. Will the Prime Minister take responsibility for this waste and corruption, or just keep blaming others? Before having the Prime Minister answer, I will just invite the member for Timmins James Bay to not speak when not invited to do so by the chair. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as always, we are thanking the Auditor General for her work. We will carefully peruse the reports and carefully consider the recommendations. We must ensure that as we fight climate change and as we move towards a greener economy, we must ensure we are also investing in a responsible and transparent manner, and that is what we will do. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the AG's report makes it very clear that the government favored McKinsey with money voted for by the Bloc Québécois, 97 contracts to McKinsey of a value of $209 million, much more than we knew of previously. That was all channeled towards this Prime Minister's favorite consulting company, with 70% of the contracts without a bid for tender, and at least 4 of the contracts were specifically designed to hire McKinsey. Why give all this money to his Liberal buddies, the Right Honourable Prime Minister? Mr. Speaker, we have taken strong measures to ensure that public service, procurement, and contract processes are more rigorous and transparent. We must ensure that taxpayer money is invested in an accountable and transparent manner. We will continue to do that as we fight climate change, as we create a stronger, growing economy.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Parliamentary Budget Officer has already proven that the Liberal carbon tax, just like the Prime Minister, is not worth the cost, saying the vast majority of people are worse off under a carbon pricing regime than without. This is partly because of the economic cost that the carbon tax imposes. One of our members for Winnipeg asked the PBO if the government had done an economic analysis of the cost, and he said yes, but they're blocking its release, referring to it as a gag order. Why the carbon tax cover-up?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we of course respect the work of the Parliamentary Budget Officer, who provides independent analysis to this government. In this instance, however, the Parliamentary Budget Officer admitted that he made a mistake with his carbon pricing reports, using incorrect analysis and modelling, which emphasises what we've been saying all along, Mr. Speaker, that 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back from the Canada Carbon Rebate while we fight climate change. The next Canada Carbon Rebate is actually going to be arriving on the 15th of July in Canadians' bank accounts right across the country. We will continue to put money in people's pockets and fight climate.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
If that was true, he would simply release the report with the real cost of the carbon tax that he's been hiding. But the Auditor General released another report showing that this Prime Minister is not worth the corruption or cost after 9 years. $123 million in spending in the Prime Minister's Green Slush Fund broke the rules. According to one of the bureaucrats involved, the entire expenditure resembles the Liberal sponsorship scandal. Will he take personal responsibility for these costs and corruption, or will he just blame others again?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has already taken measures to ensure that these programs are properly spent, that the processes are properly followed in terms of contracts. We know we need to continue to ensure value for money for taxpayers, while at the same time continuing to step up on the fight against climate change, on the creation of a green economy. That is why we continue to deliver a Canada Carbon Rebate that puts more money in 8 out of 10 Canadians' pockets in regions where it is, at the same time as we fight climate change effectively right across the country.
Hear, hear. I'm just going to ask all members to please not take the floor. As a person who has been recognized by the chair to ask the question or to answer the question, so that not only that the chair can hear all the questions and that all members can hear, but especially those who use translation devices, it's difficult for them to hear over the ambient sound. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We already knew that the Prime Minister liked to give tax dollars to his favorite consulting company, McKinsey, a company that helps supercharge drug overdose deaths as part of the opioid crisis. But today we learned from the Auditor General that it's far more money than thought. It was 200 million Canadian tax dollars for this one company. 90% of those contracts didn't follow government rules, 70% of them without a competitive process, 100% of them with the NDP voting in favor. Wow. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister commit here and now no more money for McKinsey?
Again, I asked members, and I've already asked a member from Timmins James Bay if he could please not comment while other members are speaking, so that way we can all hear. The Honourable... The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, obviously the taxpayers deserve to get value for money, which is why we've continued to strengthen our oversight and the measures whereby public servants grant contracts, including to outside consultants. We've reduced those numbers. We're making sure that we're able to both grow the economy and fight climate change at the same time as we ensure value for money. And we will, of course, continue to work with the Auditor General and her recommendations as we move forward. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we are committed to delivering more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians as we fight climate change with the Canada Carbon Rebate.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the National Committee of Parliamentarians on Security and Intelligence has tabled a report that states that there has been inaction, denial, and incompetence when it comes to handling matters of national security on the part of this cabinet. Here in this House, some elected officials, on purpose or possibly due to their naivete, have fallen under foreign influence. What is the Prime Minister going to do about this? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are very thankful to NCCOP for its hard work. We take foreign interference very seriously, and that is why we are taking all necessary measures to protect Canadians from the threat of foreign interference. We have created oversight agencies. We have created a public inquiry. We have introduced legislation for a registry of foreign influence. We have made foreign interference a serious offense. And we are enabling CSIS to share intelligence with all levels of government, businesses, researchers, and more. We will continue to protect Canadians. The Honourable Member. The Prime Minister said himself that he has not read the reports, that he has ignored them, that he has slowed down the intelligence and inquiry process. At this very moment, some elected officials may be under foreign influence. They could be in any party. The Prime Minister must answer. Because right now, this Prime Minister is doing nothing about the fact that in this Parliament there are people that are under foreign influence, and he's doing nothing. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's quite ironic that the leader of the Bloc Québécois is asking this question because he refused to receive the security clearance that would have enabled him to read the classified documents so he could actually understand the issues. And because he's refusing to receive the security clearance, he can engage in this type of partisan attack on issues that are actually very serious. And this government is taking it very seriously and doing the work.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
We know that China and India are interfering in our democracy and are using members of Parliament to do so. A Canadian is dead because India allegedly sent assassins to murder him in Surrey, BC. Yet, the Conservative leader refuses to condemn India's Modi, and the Prime Minister has failed to protect our democracy. How will this Prime Minister take this matter seriously and hold these foreign governments to account?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, since 2015, we've been the first and only government to introduce significant measures to counter foreign interference. The very creation of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, an initiative against which the Conservative Party campaigned and fought bitterly while they were in government, has allowed us to see a lot more and to make sure that all parliamentarians are aware of what the intelligence community is doing to keep Canadians safe. We've moved forward on election protections protocols. We move forward on more tools for our security agencies. We will continue to do everything necessary to protect Canadians.
Yeah. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
And the repercussions are serious.
We know that both China and India have been actively interfering in our democracy and using MPs to do so. Yet, the leader of the Conservatives is refusing to condemn India's Modi government. And this Prime Minister has failed to protect our democracy. How will this Prime Minister hold the governments of India and China accountable for their interference? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, not only are we giving new tools to our security and intelligence agencies, as well as our parliamentarians, to fight foreign interference, but also we are standing up strongly against foreign interference by being there for the rule of law and international law. We are standing up against countries that are violating the principles of international law, like Russia, China, and others. We will continue to be there to ensure that we protect people who come to Canada to leave authoritarian regimes. We will be there to protect them.
From Thornhill.
After 9 years, the Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the corruption. The AG's latest report found that the Liberal-created Green Slush Fund has been directing tens of millions of dollars into companies owned by, you guessed it, themselves. Their own civil servants called it outright incompetence, but it's worse than that. $123 million of inappropriate contracts, almost half, shouldn't have been given to those companies at all. It's even worse, $76 million connected to Liberal insiders. Is it incompetence? Is it corruption? Is it both? What the hell is going on over there?
Before I pass the floor to the responsible minister, I'm just going to ask members, please, to be very judicious in the words that they choose in this House, to making sure that it is on the right side of parliamentary and as well as polite. The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I think Canada is saying how much the Conservative will go when we're talking about climate change, Mr. Speaker. We have been very clear, Mr. Speaker. From the moment that we receive allegations, Mr. Speaker, we launched 2 investigations, one by Raymond Chabot, Grant Thornton, and one by the law firm McCarthy Tetro, and now the Auditor General, Mr. Speaker. We have been clear that we wanted to go to the bottom of this. That's what we've done, Mr. Speaker. And not only we have investigated, Mr. Speaker, we agree with the conclusion of the Auditor General. We're going to restore governance, we're going to restore funding to the clean tech in this country, and we're going to restore confidence from Canadians.
Good answer.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
How rich do Liberals have to get before they solve climate change? Tens of millions of dollars being directed back into their pockets. The Auditor General made clear that it is that minister who's responsible for the scandal. While millions eat in food banks, young people can't buy a home, families can't take a summer vacation, that minister is giving millions of dollars to his friends under the guise of his climate change ideology. Is he actually joking? When will anyone over there face a single consequence for anything?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for the question, Mr. Speaker. You see again the Conservative going, Mr. Speaker. The Auditor General's report was very clear. Parliament government decided 20 years ago to have an arm's-length organization to manage that, Mr. Speaker. We investigated the allegation. We're proposing now a new governance model, which will be under the rules of the Federal Public Service, so we can have more rules around HR, more rules around funding, Mr. Speaker. We're going to restore confidence. We're going to make sure that we have a model of delivery that have the highest standard, Mr. Speaker. We're going to fight for the clean tech in this sector.
Yes, good answer.
The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
General report makes it clear that this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost or the corruption. The Prime Minister's billion-dollar green slush fund handed out $123 million taxpayer dollars illegally. And we know this because Conservatives have been fighting against the Liberal cover-up as we've tried to expose this Liberal minister's incompetence. We know that nearly 100 conflicts of interest were uncovered because of the Auditor General's investigation. It's shocking confirmation of corruption, and we know that they're going to try and cover it up. What we need to know today, is the minister going to assure Canadians that not a single dollar of severance will go to the corrupt executives?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, again, let me tell the Canadians, the Conservative at the time, 20 years ago, wanted that to be an independent arm's-length organization, Mr. Speaker, from government. That was the delivery model that was chosen, Mr. Speaker. What we have done from the moment we had delegation, we investigated, Mr. Speaker, because we want to go to the bottom of this. We've seen the reports that have come up. We have proactively worked with the Auditor General. We're going to restore confidence. We're going to restore governance in this organization. But one thing, Mr. Speaker, we're never going to let our small and medium-sized business who are fighting for climate change in this country, we're going to fight with them.
Colleagues, normally this is the kind of energy we'd hear on a Wednesday, but I'm going to ask the honourable member, please, from St. Albert, Edmonton, to please take the microphone when he is recognised by the chair to do so. The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The only fighting that we've seen from these Liberals is fighting for more handouts for Liberal insiders. Liberal insiders lined up to get rich while Canadians line up at food banks. The Auditor General report makes it crystal clear that this Prime Minister and his government aren't worth the cost or the corruption. $76 million given out to projects connected to Liberals' friends. Liberal friends who were appointed to the slush fund by these very Liberals. Liberals lining the pockets of Liberals. We know all about it after 9 years of this corrupt Prime Minister. Will they stop the cover-up and commit to get Canadians every dollar back?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, here we go, the Conservative again, against our small and medium-sized business in this country. We're fighting for climate change, Mr. Speaker. As I've said before, once we receive allegation, we initiated the investigation, Mr. Speaker, because we wanted to go to the bottom of this. The CEO of the organization has resigned. The chair of the board has resigned. We demanded an action plan by management. We welcome the Auditor General report. We're going to restore confidence. We're going to restore governance. But we're going to make sure, Mr. Speaker, we're always going to be there to fight for small and medium-sized businesses in this country.
Very good.
L'honorable député de Mégantic-l'Érable.
The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Well, Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, he's just not worth the corruption or the cost. Not one, not two, but 3 Auditor General reports. 3 devastating titles. First of all, policies frequently disregarded by federal organizations when awarding professional services contracts. 2, significant lapses in governance and stewardship of public funds at Sustainable Development Technology Canada. And finally, Canada's response to cybercrime hindered by government's disconnected approach. Liberal buddies are happy after all of this, but meanwhile, Canadians are fighting to put food on the table. When will the government do something about this? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. I'd like to thank my colleague for giving me a chance to once again thank the Auditor General for her important work. Her reports deliver similar conclusions to those we've already seen and what has already been published by parliamentary committees. And given what we've already heard, we have taken strong action over the past year to make changes when it comes to granting contracts, for example, to businesses like McKinsey, the honorable member. And what's the result of all this hard work? Well, the Liberal Green Fund has put a lot of money into Liberal friends' pockets. The Auditor General told us this morning that the Liberal Green Fund sent $59 million to ineligible projects. That's right under the eye of the Minister of Industry, and just like usual, the minister did nothing. But we know the minister was aware. Will the minister ask his friends to reimburse Canadians for their ill-gotten gains? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives seem to be waking up. I guess it's this nice weather. As I said in English, when we heard allegations, we immediately launched investigations while they were slumbering. We took immediate action. We worked with the AG. Why? Because we want to get to the bottom of things. Our model of governance will enable us to relaunch the organization in order to be able to fund small businesses that are fighting climate change. We will bring back trust and support our small businesses. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, Mr. Speaker, we know that that report was tabled yesterday and could not have been looked at before. There's only one member of the Bloc Québécois on the committee, the member for Montarville. No one could have revealed the names in question. So I would invite the Liberal caucus to look around among themselves and tell themselves that among them there are people who are under foreign interference, foreign influence, and that during their next caucus they should perhaps speak among themselves and find out who it is. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, as I said yesterday, and I will repeat today, we need to be very careful when we talk about details of intelligence in a public context. As we've said, we are the only government who has created a series of measures that have evolved over the years to strengthen our capacity to detect foreign interference. I have a great deal of trust in our security and intelligence organizations and the RCMP, and I know that they will do what they need to do. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, we're living through difficult times. We see the situation in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Mexico. Then there's institutionalized violence, war, global warming. It is indeed a difficult time on Earth. And of course, people from throughout the world are looking for a safe harbor. And that's why we have a record number of asylum seekers, people who are waiting for a work permit and are forced to go to the food bank or get on welfare, because, as usual, Ottawa is asleep at the switch. When will this government finally start taking the matter of asylum seriously? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member across the way for his very fair question. Like many other countries, Canada is facing record high asylum requests, but that doesn't mean we're not taking it seriously. Quite the contrary. We are increasing our efforts sharply because we know that people coming here are fleeing war and violence. They need support. That takes help from Quebec. And I'd just like to say that the Bloc Québécois has fought hard to ensure that asylum seekers are properly welcomed into Quebec and Canada. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Well, thank you, but there's a cost when it comes to asylum seekers. There's a cost and there's responsibility. They need to be housed. They need to receive health care. They need to be taught French. And Ottawa isn't doing anything to help them with these things. Asylum seekers now represent 20%, nearly 20% of recipients of welfare in Quebec. The Prime Minister likes to say that the huddled masses of the earth can come to Canada, but once they actually get here, he won't lift a finger to help them. He doesn't even give them a work permit within 30 days. Is that what the Liberals really think being welcoming is? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. A few weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, the member across the way was saying that it took 6 to 8 months. Now we're ensuring that people do get their work permit We know that it helps them once they can work. We want to do better. Of course, applications are at a record high level, but I'm looking forward to working closely with Quebec on this.
From Calgary, Midnapore.
The AG report proves this Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the corruption. This NDP Liberal government spent $200 million on McKinsey, which is just another example of this Prime Minister favoring his insider friends. The AG stated this was a flagrant disregard for procurement rules as the government sole sourced with no justification and competitive processes were changed to favor McKinsey. The clear favoritism is just one more example of this government choosing their friends over integrity. Why has this Prime Minister been caught time and time again red-handed, giving his friends lucrative contracts?
The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we thank my colleague for asking this important question, which allows me to thank again the Auditor General for her important work on this topic. The report comes to similar conclusions as the report that were released by the government last year, and based on those previous findings, we have been acting for more than a year to end the standing offers with McKinsey and all similar companies, which also introduces stricter requirements for departments doing their own contracting authorities.
The Honourable Member from Calgary, Midnapore.
Dominic Barton, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost or corruption. Dominic Barton is the former global head of McKinsey who was handpicked by the PM to be the Canadian ambassador to China and the chair of the Economic Advisory Council. So it's no surprise that after 2016, McKinsey contracting began to go up and up with few signs of stopping. He even joined a meeting between McKinsey and the Canada Infrastructure Bank while he was the ambassador, a meeting he hid from members of committee. Why should Canadians tolerate a Prime Minister who promotes his rich friends and a government run by McKinsey?
The Honourable Minister for Public Works, Public Services and Procurement.
Mr. Speaker, as I just said in English, but I can repeat in French, we are very grateful to the AG for her hard work on this file. Now, the report has similar conclusions to the report published by the government last year, but we will continue to consider the recommendations. For about a year, bids for tender for McKinsey and similar businesses have been cancelled, and we will continue to make requirements stricter for departments with these types of contracting processes.
Member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
The Auditor General's report proves that after 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost or corruption. In her audit of McKinsey, the AG found this Liberal government broke the rules, showed clear favoritism, and could not demonstrate value for money. This Prime Minister needs to take responsibility. Almost $200 million was awarded to McKinsey. Contracts were rigged, Liberal insiders got rich, and taxpayers are on the hook. Will the Prime Minister finally ban McKinsey from government contracting?
The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've already answered this question multiple times now. I would just add that in addition to what I've said, these contracts have been closely examined several times, including by the Auditor General, and no indication of political interference was ever found. But talking of contracts, Mr. Speaker, may I talk about dental care, about which the Conservative leader has nothing to say because he believes and claims that it doesn't exist. 2 million seniors in Canada, Mr. Speaker, have already registered with dental. Now, why is the Conservative leader misinforming and hurting seniors by telling them it doesn't exist?
The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
The Auditor General's report proves once again that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost and the corruption. Now, Liberals love McKinsey, and apparently all is fair in love and government contracting. Most of these $200 million in McKinsey contracts didn't follow the rules. In almost half, it wasn't clear that the contract was needed. And in some cases, the government even rigged the process to favor McKinsey. Why do these Liberals show such affection for McKinsey, but such disdain for Canadian taxpayers?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, that question has already been answered several times by my colleagues, but I am glad to hear the Conservatives, albeit obliquely, talking about income inequality in our society. It's a concern that we share. And the good news for the Conservatives is they have the opportunity to support us and to support our increase in the capital gains inclusion rate, a way to ask those at the very top to help the Canadian middle class. Let's see if the Conservatives will do it.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, for years now, CBSA officers are asking for a fair retirement. It's a question of justice and respect for these workers that guarantee our security. For 3 years now, a committee has been studying the matter. The President of the Treasury Board received recommendations in December. Since, nothing has been said. There could be a strike starting on Thursday in 48 hours. Why are the Liberals lagging again when it comes to defending workers' rights? The Honourable President of the Treasury Board. Mr. Speaker, that's simply not true. We are at the table. We are continuing to negotiate because it is essential to have an agreement that is fair for taxpayers and also for our public servants. We continue to be here for the public service in order to reach an agreement that is fair and equitable. We are here, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Nunavut.
Nunavut already pays some of the highest airfares in the world. The lowest airfare in 2023 from Ottawa to Greece Seaward was over $11,000.
Unbelievable.
Even worse, baggage fees recently went up, ripping off Northerners even more. This is all happening under the Liberals' watch when they promised airline costs would not go up in the north. Flights are a lifeline in Nunavut. Why is this government letting airlines gouge Nunavut for essential travel?
The Honourable Minister responsible for Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member for that very important question. We know that affordability is front and center in everything we do all over Canada, especially the North. We've brought forward $10 a day childcare for affordability. Nunavut were the first province or territory to take advantage of that. Certainly, affordability is front and center. We realize that the cost of travel may be high. We're looking into ways to make it more affordable.
The Honourable Member,
The Honourable Member for Saint-Laurent.
Speaker, every single Conservative MP voted against pharmacare to provide universal access to contraception, and their own caucus members have expressed anti-choice rhetoric. One Conservative member has referenced this legislation as focusing on wiping out or tapering the population. Could the Minister of Health please share how this Conservative member is missing the point of the legislation and how her remarks can be harmful for women and gender-diverse Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, we know that over half of the Conservative caucus has been confirmed as being anti-choice, to be against a woman's right to choose. But we know that 100% of Conservative MPs voted against contraception, free contraception for women. Mr. Speaker, when you make comments like that, it becomes clear that if you're both against abortion and against access to contraception, you're against a woman's right to choose and have autonomy over her own body. It isn't Conservative MPs who should tell women whether or not they should or shouldn't start a family. It is women themselves who must always make that decision.
The Honourable Member from Brantford-Brant.
The explosive Auditor General's report proves that the Prime Minister is not worth the cost and corruption. This NDP Liberal government knew conflict of interest policies weren't being followed, and wait for it, did absolutely nothing. $76 million greenlit by Liberal-appointed directors, never to be seen again. Canadians deserve so much better. If the minister knew about these conflicts, why didn't he take his job seriously and fire the directors?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I actually welcome the question from the member because it seems that they have not really listened, Mr. Speaker. The moment we heard of allegation, we launched the investigation when they were asleep, Mr. Speaker. We launched the investigation by Raymond Chabot, Grant Thornton, and McCarty Tetreault. And once we have that, we suspended funding to the organization. The chair of the board and the CEO resigned. We demanded an action plan by management, Mr. Speaker. We are committed to restore the funding to the firms. We are committed to have more governance, and we are committed to ensure that there will be trust in a new organization, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
The minister did nothing for 48 months, even though he had officials sitting in the meetings. And the Auditor General's explosive report on the NDP Liberal Green Slush Fund shows the personal friends of the Prime Minister funneled obscene amounts of money into their own pockets. The Auditor General confirmed that an incredible 186 times, almost half of all the Green Slush Fund projects, Liberal swindlers voted themselves hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money to their companies. Will the Prime Minister call in the police and make these Liberal swindlers pay back this money?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, it seems that there were a lot of people on this side slipping at the switch, Mr. Speaker. What I've said is very clear. We received allegation and we investigated, Mr. Speaker. We investigated. We made sure that we would go to the bottom of this. We suspended the funding to the organization. The chair of the board and the CEO resigned. We made sure that there would be a management plan in place, Mr. Speaker. We want to restore confidence. We expect everyone to adhere by the highest governance. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, we're proposing a new model of governance that will make sure that public fund is dispersed and with the level of governance that all Canadians expect.
The honourable member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal NDP bloc government that isn't worth the cost and the corruption, the Auditor General tells us that the Sustainable Development Canada programme violated its conflict of interest policies 90 times and awarded $59 million to 10 projects that weren't even eligible. Mr. Speaker, another deficient government from the Liberal government. Why is this government not vigilant, and why does it endorse this waste of money? The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Mr. Speaker, it's the member for Lévis that's suddenly waking up. As I said, Mr. Speaker, we received allegations in February 2023. In March 2023, we launched an investigation into an organisation that was created independently 20 years ago. And then the report was submitted by a lawyer's office. We took the measures necessary. We suspended the funding, Mr. Speaker. The president of the board of directors resigned, and we will be here to restore confidence and make sure that our SMEs can receive money. The honourable member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, this minister is sleeping at the wheel. The Auditor General has discovered that $76 million in funding has been granted to projects with ties to Liberal cronies. Greasing the palms and enriching Liberal cronies is blatantly unethical and irresponsible. Yet another scandal. Mr. Speaker, why are conflict of interest and money for friends so commonplace with this Liberal government? The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Mr. Speaker, we can all recognise that the member for Lévis is a great actor, but the reality of the matter is simple. I'll say it and I'll say it again so that everyone can allow it to percolate. The integrity is the most important thing for us, Mr. Speaker, and that is the reason for which, when we received allegations, we launched an investigation. We made sure that funds were suspended until we got the conclusions of this investigation. The head of the organisation resigned. The head of the board of directors resigned. We are proposing a new governance model in order to restore trust and make sure that we can support SMEs that are in green technology, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Terrebonne. The Auditor General's report on the contracts awarded to McKinsey by the government has just been released. 97 contracts worth over $200 million. More importantly, we learned that 71% of these contracts were awarded without a call for tender. 9 of the 10 departments and 8 of the 10 crown corporations involved broke the rules. The AG even points out that this is a widespread problem. How can the Liberals increase the public service by 40% whilst at the same time relying on untendered contracts with private firms? the Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A great opportunity once again to thank and commend the work undertaken by the Auditor General. Thank you for her conclusions. They are similar to those we have already heard over the past few months. These are conclusions that have allowed us over the past few months to take into account these conclusions to put an end to orders with McKinsey and any other similar organization that also involves stricter parameters for all departments that have private contracts. The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General's report also shows that the use of McKinsey has skyrocketed since the Liberals came to power. But, we'd already noticed that. But for several of these contracts, the departments were unable to prove that all the consultants had the required security clearance. Yet McKinsey ended up with both hands in the pockets of public services, immigration, Trans Mountain, and even national defence. How can the Liberals tolerate their own rules being bent and circumvented even when it comes to security? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the member is right to indicate two things. The first of which is security, the second of which are expenses. Let's just start with expenses. The President of the Treasury Board has been very clear. We are revising by 15% contracts to give the public service even more capacity to better serve Canadians. With regard to security, the Auditor General was very clear. We have to be better able to share and store this information.
The Honourable Member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
After 9 years, another gag order victim of this Liberal NDP Prime Minister has come forward. This time, it's his own parliamentary budgeting officer who revealed yesterday that there's a secret government document that would lambaste and completely put to shame the claims on the carbon tax scam. This secret report would confirm most Canadians are worse off in this scam than what they get in phony rebates, and emissions have gone up. Will this Liberal NDP Prime Minister lift the gag order on the PBO so Canadians and everyone can know what they already know, that this Prime Minister and this carbon tax scam are not worth the cost?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change and the Minister for Fitness and Amateur Sport.
Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer does important and essential work, and we thank him for the update. Recently, he had an update on his website saying that the last estimate that he had done was based on faulty information, and we thank him for correcting the record. It confirms what we know all along, that economists and independent organizations across this country have been saying, which is that 8 out of 10 Canadians are better off with federal carbon pricing. But, Mr. Speaker, the reason the Conservatives are so bent out of shape about this is because it re-emphasizes the fact that carbon pricing both lowers emissions and the Canada Carbon Rebate supports affordability.
The Honourable Member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Well, maybe they're gagging the PBO because they're ashamed. He's going to reveal that this carbon tax scam is not worth the cost, and it'll confirm that a majority of Canadians are worse off in this scam than what they get back in phony rebates. Look, if they don't want to ungag him and they don't want to release the report, why don't they just call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide whether they want to keep this scam or axe a tax under a common-sense Conservative government?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change and Sport and Physical Activity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives have clung to this flawed scenario, and they refuse to correct their own misinformation on this very important subject. Mr. Speaker, I would recommend that the Leader of the Opposition maybe go to Carleton over the summer and brush up on his mathematics. However, it's very clear that it's probably elementary school that he needs to go back to. We're talking about adding and subtracting, Mr. Speaker. Conservative math just isn't adding up these days, but I want to reassure Canadians that on July 15th, the Canada Carbon Rebate will be arriving in their bank accounts or their mailboxes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, everybody knows in Canada that, except for maybe this NDP Liberal coalition, that they pay more in the carbon tax than they get back in a rebate. It turns out that even this government knew, even the Prime Minister knows, and you want to know why? We know that because the PBO officer said that. When will this government finally release this report and end the carbon tax cover-up?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, and Canadians know that 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back with the carbon rebate. But, Mr. Speaker, there is someone who is being gagged, and that is an MP who sits in this House of Commons, the MP for Peace River Westlock. He had the temerity to say out loud what the majority of Conservative MPs believe, which is that a woman should not have the right to choose.
Right.
Now we know that these Conservatives who campaigned on a price on pollution and are disavowing it will do the same thing with the woman.
The honourable member from Malpeque.
Mr. Speaker, this past weekend I was pleased to join colleagues in Halifax for an announcement in the funding for the Ronald McDonald House Charities Atlantic. Ronald McDonald House serves as a place of comfort and stability for many families across Atlantic Canada in time of need. This weekend's announcement will ensure that Ronald McDonald House Atlantic is the first net zero house in Canada, made possible due to our government's commitment to infrastructure investments and climate action, unlike the official opposition. Can the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities please speak to the importance of this investment?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for joining me in Halifax to visit Ronald McDonald House. The Ronald McDonald House organization is an incredible organization that allows families to make sure that they have a place to be when they're away from home to seek treatment for children who are sick. We had an opportunity while we were there to meet Brittany and Riley, who recently welcomed Finley, their new addition, who arrived a little bit earlier than expected, but because the services being provided allowed them a place to stay, they were able to get the treatment they need. We're investing nearly $3 million to help make the facility more efficient, more accessible, and importantly, double the capacity to serve 1,200 families. I want to say thank you to all the volunteers and the workers who make it possible to have such a wonderful facility.
The honourable member from Montmagny-Lillet, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal government, life is too expensive and Quebecers are paying the price. Yesterday, the Liberal bloc voted against suspending a carbon tax that would give a break to Quebecers. The Bloc Québécois wants to radically increase taxes that are very expensive for Quebecers. The Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed to the Finance Committee yesterday that the government has an analysis of the economic impact of the carbon tax. They've kept it secret. When will the Minister publish a secret report that proves that Quebecers are right to ask for a bit of a break this summer? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance. Mr. Speaker, during the election campaign of 2021, all Conservative MPs promised to put a price on pollution. It was important, especially in Quebec, because Quebecers understand the importance and the severity of climate change. And now we've seen a flip-flop from the Conservatives. And now, the next thing they might flip-flop about is the women's right to choose. We should be scared of these Conservatives.
The honourable member from Charleswood St. James, Assiniboia Headingley.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, the Prime Minister is hiding the truth about the carbon tax, that it costs Canadians more than they pay. Yesterday, the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed he'd received information from the Liberal government that confirms his report, that Canadians pay more, but was under a Liberal gag order from talking about it. Canadians know it costs them more. When will the Prime Minister stop gagging the PBO and release the secret report that proves Canadians are right?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the only person being gagged in Ottawa right now is the Conservative Member of Parliament for Peace River West.
That's right. That's true.
He committed the cardinal political crime among this power-hungry Conservative Party of actually telling the truth, of actually telling Canadians what he believes and what he intends to do. That is to end a woman's right to choose. He's in a majority in that caucus. It's time for the Conservatives to tell Canadians the truth about their intentions.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, on April 16th, the Liberals announced that they were increasing taxes on the investments of Canadians through an increase to the capital gains tax. Right. That tax is supposed to take effect 3 weeks from today, and Canadians have not seen the legislation yet. Right. One wonders what the government's doing over there. When will the government show small businesses, families, farmers, entrepreneurs, and physicians the text of the bill so that they know how this tax increase will impact them?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Finally, a good question from the Conservatives. I am so glad to say that we will begin the legislative process to raise the capital gains inclusion rate before the House rises. And one of the reasons that is so important is it will give Canadians a chance to see the true colors of these Conservatives. So far, they have dithered and they have dodged, and they have not said whether they are in favor of asking those who are doing the very best to pay a little more. Soon, they're not going to have a chance to dodge.
L'honorable député de Châteauguay-Lacolle.
The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle, Mr. Speaker. As you know, Canada is committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050, and our government is working very hard in all sectors to make this goal as ambitious as it needs to be. One of the initiatives we have implemented is the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Programme, which aims to make Canada's infrastructure less polluting, more sustainable, but also more accessible and inclusive.
A concrete example of a project that is supported by this program and explain why this is beneficial for the community that receives this funding?
The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the Green Inclusive Community Buildings Programme, our government is investing massive amounts in the one like for the Stanstead's Arts Centre.
Funding will bring Le Théâtre Sans Frontières back to life. It will host a variety of cultural and artistic events, as well as many community activities. Le Théâtre.
The revitalised theatre will play an important role in the economic development of this small municipality close to our border. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton-Griesbach.
Today's Auditor General report confirms what we already know, that the Liberals and Conservatives love their Bay Street McKinsey friends. So much so that McKinsey got over $200 million and billions more were given to other management firms. Our public service has the skills and is ready to do the work. But once again, the Liberals and Conservatives give preferential treatment to ultra-rich corporations. So when will they start respecting our public service and stop forking over money to rich consultants?
The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for our colleague to giving me another opportunity to thank and be very grateful to the Auditor General for her important report. Although the report comes to similar conclusions as the reports released by the government last year, it is obviously important input so that we can continue the work that we have done, such as making sure that we are more, for instance, removing McKinsey and similar companies from standing offers. We're also introducing stricter requirements for other departments to do their own contracting in a way that guarantees integrity and confidence in our procurement process.
The Honourable Member from Port Moody Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians with disabilities are struggling to keep up with high costs of food and housing. And the Liberals' measly $200 plan will leave people with disabilities living well below the poverty line. The government has an obligation legally to uphold human rights and to ensure an adequate standard of living for everyone. But shamefully, the Liberals are failing, just like the Conservatives before them. When will the Liberals get serious about ending poverty for persons with disabilities?
The Honourable Minister Minister for Persons with Disabilities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Canada Disability Benefit is a major milestone in our strong and unwavering commitment to creating a more inclusive and fairer Canada. Mr. Speaker, through this budget, we have committed over $6.1 billion as the initial investments for the Canada Disability Benefit. This is the first ever federal benefit designed for persons with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, we know there's more to do, but we'll make sure and continue to work with provinces and territories first to make sure that there are no clawbacks and to see what more we can do to support individuals with disabilities, Mr. Speaker, now and into the future. Thank you.
And so brings us to the end of question period. However, I would like to bring to the attention of members in the presence in the gallery of Ms. Alexandra Motvichuk, Chair of the Center for Civil Liberties in Ukraine, a joint recipient